Hi everyone, this is Mother Leigh Hall coming to you from my home on a very rainy Maundy Thursday. I hope this video finds you safe and well in the midst of this very strange time of isolation and quarantine, which is a good thing that we're doing, but a hard thing, especially around Easter and in the midst of the Holy Triduum, which we are beginning today with Maundy Thursday. In this video, I have pieced together a few of our very traditional offerings that we do on this day, including the stripping of the altar. And there's a hymn at the end of that comes later on in the video. But I've also spliced in a video from a sermon from one of our wonderful bishops, Bishop Mary Glasspool, who does a wonderful job preaching about this particular day, which is the day that we remember the institution of the Eucharist and the washing of the disciples' feet. So we remember eating together, but we also remember Jesus's servant ministry and, of course, his commandment to us to wash each other's feet. And the bishop does a great job of preaching about that in this sermon. And we've gotten our bishop's permissions to include their sermons in our Holy Week offerings and our Triduum offerings. So please know that you are in my prayers, that I love you, I miss you, I look forward to being with you again when we're back together at St. Nick's, and that service will certainly be our Easter service this year, wherever it falls on the calendar. But we will be offering two things on Good Friday and an Easter vigil, and we'll come together on Easter Sunday morning in a pre-game coffee hour in anticipation of the Festal Eucharist at the Washington National Cathedral at 11:15 with Bishop Curry as preacher. So again, I wish you all the best. You're in my prayers, and I do hope to see you soon. We'll get through this. It's hard, but we are a resurrection people, and we know that there is hope, that we have the hope and promise of life on the other side of this experience. So yeah, that's all I got for now. This is Mother Leigh signing off, and please enjoy the sermon by Bishop Glasspool with the stripping of the altar and a classic Maundy Thursday hymn. Be well. God bless you.
The things that happen on Maundy Thursday are so intimate in nature that I would say it's almost better to do them at home. There are two areas of focus on this sacred day, and we in the Church have ritualized each of them to the degree that they have lost some, but not all, of their intimacy. The first focus is the Holy Eucharist, or the Last Supper. Let's pause to remember that the service we know as the Holy Eucharist grew out of a Passover meal Jesus had with his closest followers. This is the day of the meal. It is a day to recall with special sensitivity the meaning of our gatherings when we are able to gather in the flesh, to take bread and wine in the refreshment we call communion. This is the day when, with less than 24 hours left, Jesus chooses to share a meal with those who were and are closest to him. On that night, long ago, Jesus issued a permanent invitation to share that meal with him. He promised that, no matter what the circumstances, he would always be there. He suggested that it would be a profound way to become more intimately related to our sisters and brothers. He hoped that his followers would, by coming together for a meal, be constantly reminded of his great act of love in redeeming them, his death and resurrection. He takes the bread and names it his body. The wine he names his blood. As they share it, they realize they are no longer individuals. They are becoming a body, one body. Jesus is passing on his life, his very body, into the bodies of his disciples, who silently break off the pieces of flat bread and nervously swallow the local wine. As they do so, they become one with him, and therein each other. Not that they knew all of this at the time, in any formed or conscious way. The process was wiser and more effective than mere explanation and analysis and planning. These are the methods we are so fond of in our different culture and distant century. Nonetheless, in accepting and receiving the commission of his life and work through this meal, they felt its power and they knew its purpose, binding them to Jesus indissolubly and yet allowing them absolute freedom. Later on, the Apostle Paul writes about this meal to the church in Corinth. From him, we learn that this meal requires what he later in that letter calls love. Love, not as a feeling of warmth in the heart, but as a practical and institutionalized concern for others, as they are also part of the church, however different and diverse their gifts. The sin above all other sins in the church, and especially at the meal, is discrimination. Racial, social, spiritual, any kind of discrimination. For love is measured not by feeling, but by how much tension it can stand. Paul's model of love is, the more love, the more diversity. So it is, my friends, that when we are able to join together in this fellowship we call church, when we share in Christ's own body and blood, Christ brings us together with people with whom we would probably never congregate were we to create our own community of love among like-minded people. The only thing that brings us all together is our common participation in Christ's gift, our common need for Christ, our common need of sticking together in the night of deliverance and liberation. And if it is true that even Judas was there with them, who are we to draw our lines and limits? Alas, we are not able to gather for public worship at this time. We do not gather with those who are different from us, yet united out of our common need for Christ. Most of us, right now, are sheltered in place, praying at home, perhaps engaging one another through that ubiquitous app, Zoom. To all of us, I say there is another focus to this day, to Maundy Thursday, and that is, of course, Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. And during supper, Jesus got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel around himself. You see, it's really very simple. Jesus moved from the table to the towel to show us that love and service are one. If the disciples were under the spell of the mystical union created by his words and actions at the table, it was to be rudely broken. The story of the upper room tells us what kind of Christ we worship and what kind of Christ we try to serve. Belief and action, worship and service, devotion and duty. These things we cannot separate, but we do try to separate them. Some of us want the church of the table, a place where we can forget the ledger books and dishcloths and concentrate on the Holy Eucharist in the real presence of Christ. Others of us want the Church of the Towel, a community that is devoted to cleaning up the dirt and dealing with injustice in the world around us. With our passion for finding labels, we might call one group pietists, the other group activists, and we think we have sliced the church neatly down the middle. Surely here in the upper room, we can learn that the Church of the Table is the Church of the Towel. How could Jesus more plainly say that communion with him is not something that takes place in the recesses of the soul when we meet around the table, but a response of our whole being with all that we possess to Christ's self-giving love? Jesus saw nothing incongruous in passing from the solemn breaking of the bread and pouring of the wine to a basin and a towel, from instituting the sacrament of his body and blood to scrubbing the dirty feet of his bewildered disciples. And he is saying in almost identical words, "This too do in remembrance of me." If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. To call this Jesus Master and Lord involves at once the practical, humble, and costly service of our sisters and brothers in the world. To follow this Jesus, to do this in remembrance of him, is for the Church of the Table to be the Church of the Towel. To follow this Jesus means that love and service are one.
my God, why have you forsaken me, and are so far from my cry and from the words of my distress? O my God, I cry in the daytime, but you do not answer. By night as well, but I find no rest. Yet you are the Holy One, enthroned upon the praises of Israel. Our forefathers put their trust in you. They trusted, and you delivered them. They cried out to you and were delivered. They trusted in you and were not put to shame. But as for me, I am a worm and no man, scorned by all and despised by the people. All who see me laugh me to scorn. They curl their lips and wag their heads, saying, "He trusted in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, if he delights in him." Yet you are he who took me out of the womb and kept me safe upon my mother's breast. I have been entrusted to you ever since I was born. You were my God when I was still in my mother's womb. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is none to help. Many young bulls encircle me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their jaws at me like a ravening and a roaring lion. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart within my breast is melting wax. My mouth is dried out like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. And you have laid me in the dust of the grave. Packs of dogs close me in, and gangs of evildoers circle around me. They pierce my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them. They cast lots for my clothing. Be not far away, O Lord. You are my strength. Hasten to help me. Save me from the sword, my life from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth, my wretched body from the horns of wild bulls. I will declare your name to my brethren. In the midst of the congregation, I will praise you.